Before we start, thank you for being here. Tonight's story is a reported true case, told exactly as it's been documented. No exaggeration. No added fiction. If you enjoy long-form, real horror stories like this, consider subscribing. It helps the channel more than you think. Now, let's begin. The Dybbuk Box. A reported true horror story. Part 1. The box that was never meant to be open. People like to pretend we've outgrown superstition. We live in the age of smartphones, space telescopes, and refrigerators that can tell you when you're out of milk. So naturally, the idea of cursed objects sounds ridiculous. Until you're standing alone in your house at night, and something that shouldn't be open is. This story begins in September of 2001, which was already not a great time to invite additional bad energy into your life. A man named Kevin Mannis owned a small antique business. Nothing fancy. No haunted mansion tours. No crystal balls. Just old furniture, old trinkets, and the occasional object that smelled like it had opinions about you. Kevin wasn't religious. He wasn't spiritual. He didn't believe in curses. He believed in buying low and selling high. One weekend, Kevin attended an estate sale in Portland, Oregon. The home belonged to an elderly woman who had recently passed away. Her belongings were ordinary: dresses, china, photographs faded to the color of dust. And then there was the box. It was a small wooden cabinet, about the size of a wine crate. Handcrafted. Dark wood. No markings. No lock. No label explaining what it was supposed to be. Just old. Uncomfortably old. Kevin later said it didn't feel evil. It felt out of place, like an object that didn't belong to the room or the house or maybe even the time period. The woman running the estate sale noticed Kevin staring at it. She walked over and asked him not to buy it. Not that it was already sold. Not that it wasn't for sale. Just, please don't take that. Kevin laughed at first and asked why. The woman hesitated before explaining that the box had belonged to her grandmother, a Jewish woman who had survived a Nazi concentration camp during World War II. According to the family, the grandmother believed the box contained a Dybbuk. In Jewish folklore, a Dybbuk is a friendly ghost or a misunderstood spirit. It is believed to be a malicious entity, restless, parasitic, and attached to suffering. Something that lingers because it has nowhere else to go. The grandmother kept the box sealed for decades. She warned her family never to open it, never to look inside, never to remove the contents. She even asked to be buried with it. That request was denied. Kevin listened to the entire story, nodded politely, and bought the box anyway. Because humans have an incredible talent for ignoring warnings when money or curiosity is involved. That night, Kevin brought the box home and placed it in his workshop. He didn't open it. He went to sleep. That's when the nightmares started. Kevin dreamed of an elderly woman with hollow eyes screaming at him in a language he didn't understand. The dream felt aggressive, personal, like he was being yelled at for something he didn't realize he'd done. He woke up soaked in sweat. And the room smelled strongly of urine. Not faintly. Not maybe. Strong enough that he checked the floor. Checked himself. Checked the box. Nothing was there. Kevin brushed it off. Bad dream. Stress. Old buildings smell weird. The brain fills in gaps when it's tired. The next morning, he noticed something strange. The box wouldn't stay closed. No matter how many times he shut the doors, they slowly drifted open again. There was no warping. No loose hinges. Nothing physically wrong with it. Kevin eventually sold the box to his mother. Which is one way to say, I don't want this in my house anymore, but I'm also not ready to admit that out loud. Shortly after receiving the box, Kevin's mother suffered a massive stroke. Doctors could not identify a clear cause. Kevin took the box back. He then gave it to a friend, another antiques dealer. Within days, the friend began experiencing sudden hair loss, clumps falling out in the shower, bald patches appearing almost overnight. He developed unexplained rashes, and complained constantly of feeling watched. He returned the box. Kevin stored it in his shop. That's when things escalated. Lights flickered without explanation. Doors slammed on their own. Electronics failed randomly. Employees refused to be alone in the building. One employee quit after claiming she saw a dark shape standing behind Kevin while he worked, even though no one else was there. At this point, Kevin did what everyone had told him not to do. He opened the box. Inside were several items: 2 old pennies, a small granite statue, a dried flower, a gold wine cup, and strands of human hair, bound together. Nothing inside explained anything, and that somehow made it worse. That night, the nightmares returned, more intense than before. The same woman, the same rage. This time, she spoke clearly. She told Kevin she hated him. She told him he had no idea what he had released. Soon after, Kevin's health began to fail. His vision deteriorated rapidly. His liver started shutting down. Doctors ran test after test and could not determine why. Terrified, Kevin sealed the box again. He listed it online for sale, with a warning. Some people laughed. One man didn't. His name was Jason Haxton, and he bought the box. The internet is full of warnings that people ignore without a second thought. Pop-up alerts, terms and conditions, and every once in a while, a sentence that should probably stop you in your tracks. This object has caused harm to everyone who owned it. In 2003, that sentence appeared in an eBay listing for an old wooden wine cabinet. Most people scrolled past it. One man didn't. His name was Jason Haxton. At the time, Jason was the director of the Museum of Osteopathic Medicine in Missouri. His job revolved around medical history, preserved organs, skeletal remains, and the long, uncomfortable story of what happens to the human body over time. He was not easily rattled. He was also not religious, not spiritual, and not someone who believed objects could be cursed. Jason later explained that he didn't buy the box because he thought it was haunted. He bought it because he was curious. Specifically, he was interested in how belief and expectation could affect people. How trauma could attach meaning to an object. How fear could create physical symptoms. In his mind, the Dybbuk Box was a psychological case study. And psychology, unlike curses, could be controlled. The box arrived a few days later. Jason didn't open it. He placed it in his home, still sealed, and went on with his life. Work during the day. Quiet evenings. Sleep at night. That routine didn't last long. The dreams began first. Not vague dreams. Not half-remembered images. These were vivid, detailed, and repetitive. Jason described dreaming of an elderly woman with a twisted face screaming at him in a language he didn't understand. There was always pressure in the dream. Weight on his chest. The sensation of being pinned down, unable to move or breathe properly. He told himself it was stress. The human brain is very good at punishing curiosity. Then came the smells. Jason began noticing the scent of jasmine flowers appearing suddenly in his home. Strong enough to stop him mid-step. Lingering just long enough to be undeniable. There were no flowers in the house. No candles. No air fresheners. No explanation. The smell would vanish as abruptly as it appeared. Next came the physical symptoms. Jason developed a persistent cough that refused to go away. His eyes burned constantly, as if he were exposed to smoke or chemicals that didn't exist. Fatigue set in, the kind that sleep doesn't fix. Then his hair started falling out. Not gradually. Not from stress. Bald patches appeared almost overnight. His skin broke out in painful lesions. Doctors ran tests and found nothing conclusive. No autoimmune disorders. No clear diagnosis. Through all of this, Jason still refused to open the box. And that detail matters. Because despite his skepticism, something about the cabinet unsettled him in a way he couldn't explain. It wasn't fear. It was hesitation. Eventually, curiosity won. Jason opened the Dybbuk Box. Inside were the same items described by previous owners. 2 old pennies, a small granite statue, a dried flower, a gold wine cup, and strands of human hair bound together. Nothing inside explained anything. And somehow, that made it worse. Jason resealed the box. That night, he experienced what he would later describe as the most terrifying episode of his life. He woke up unable to move. He couldn't breathe. There was immense pressure on his chest, arms, and legs, as if something invisible was holding him down. In the darkness, he saw the same elderly woman from his dreams. This time, she spoke clearly. She told him his time was running out. Jason woke up screaming. When he turned on the light, he found deep scratch marks across his chest. Long, deliberate lines. Not shallow. Not accidental. Jason lived alone. He had no pets. There was no explanation. At that point, the Dybbuk box stopped being an experiment. Jason contacted a rabbi. The rabbi listened carefully, asked questions, requested photographs of the box and its contents. Then he refused to help. He warned Jason that Dybbuks were not folklore to be treated casually. They were believed to attach themselves through trauma and suffering, and opening the box may have strengthened whatever was inside. Jason contacted another rabbi. Same response. Eventually, one agreed to advise him, under strict conditions. The box was not to be opened again. It was to be sealed, and it was to be kept far away from places where people lived and slept. Jason followed the instructions, but the damage didn't stop immediately. His health continued to deteriorate. His vision worsened. His liver began failing without explanation. At one point, doctors told him he might need a transplant. No cause was ever identified. Jason began documenting everything. Every dream. Every symptom. Every change. And a pattern emerged. Whenever the box was moved farther away from him, his symptoms improved. Whenever it came closer, they worsened. Distance mattered. Eventually, the Dybbuk box was sealed and stored far from Jason's home. Slowly, his health stabilized. Not completely, but enough. Jason would later share his experience publicly. He provided medical records, photographs, and timelines. He never claimed the box was definitively supernatural. He didn't need to, because after him, no one who handled the box walked away unchanged, and some refused to even be in the same room with it. By the time the Dybbuk box was sealed and moved away from Jason Haxton, one uncomfortable fact had settled in. Whatever this thing was, it did not behave randomly. Different people had owned it. Different homes. Different beliefs. Yet the outcomes followed the same pattern every time. Jason began doing what came most naturally to him, documenting everything. He reached out to previous owners, temporary handlers, transporters, and anyone who had spent extended time near the box. He didn't lead with the word Dybbuk. He didn't suggest curses or spirits. He simply asked questions. What did you experience? When did it start? How long were you near the box? The responses were unsettling. Several people reported sudden headaches, nausea, and overwhelming fatigue after being in the same room as the cabinet. Others described vivid nightmares beginning the same night they encountered it. More than one person mentioned the smell of jasmine. Always jasmine. There were also emotional changes. People became irritable for no reason. Short-tempered. Depressed. Relationships deteriorated. Sleep suffered. In a few cases, individuals described intrusive thoughts that felt aggressive and foreign, not aligned with their personality. Jason charted everything. Dates. Distances. Duration of exposure. And one detail kept repeating itself. The closer someone was to the box, the worse their symptoms became. This wasn't superstition. It was proximity. Skeptics had explanations, of course. Psychosomatic response. Stress-induced symptoms. Expectation creating physical effects. Jason welcomed skepticism. He needed it. If this was psychological, it needed to be proven. But there were cracks in that theory. Some people who experienced symptoms had not been told the box's history. They didn't know what it was. They weren't primed to expect anything unusual. And yet, the effects appeared anyway. One individual who helped transport the sealed box reported intense nightmares for weeks afterward. He had been told it was simply an antique cabinet. Another refused to enter the storage area where the box was kept, claiming the air felt heavy, not cold, not hot, just oppressive. Jason himself continued to experience health issues, though they were less severe now that the box was stored far away. His doctors remained confused. Liver damage without a cause. Vision problems without explanation. Modern medicine had no satisfying answers. At one point, the box was brought out briefly for documentation purposes. Photographs were taken. Measurements recorded. The seal was not broken. That night, multiple people involved reported nightmares. Jason's symptoms worsened again. The box was returned to storage. The improvement resumed. This happened enough times that coincidence became difficult to defend. Eventually, the Dybbuk box was sealed using traditional methods described by religious scholars. Wax, binding, protective inscriptions. Not to destroy what was inside, but to contain it. That distinction mattered. You destroy something harmless. You contain something dangerous. After the sealing, reports slowed. Not completely, but noticeably. The box was later placed in controlled environments, museums, exhibitions, always sealed, always monitored. Even then, some staff refused to be near it. Not because they believed in demons, but because experience had taught them caution. Jason never claimed certainty. He didn't say, "This is a demon." He didn't say, "This is a curse." But because experience had taught them caution, Jason never claimed certainty. He didn't say, "This is a demon." He didn't say, "This is a curse." He said something far more unsettling. That I don't know what it is doesn't mean it's nothing. Because whatever followed that cabinet from owner to owner never needed belief to operate. It didn't need fear. It didn't need faith. It just needed access. And the Dybbuk box, sealed and silent, still exists. Which raises a final question that has never been answered. Not what was in the box, but what might still be attached to it. By the time the Dybbuk box was officially sealed and removed from everyday contact, many people believed the story was effectively over. The object had been contained. The symptoms had slowed. The worst effects appeared to be behind those involved. That belief rested on one dangerous assumption. That containment is the same as resolution. Jason Haxton never claimed the box had been neutralized. In fact, he was careful with his language. He described it as isolated, not cured. Restricted, not ended. Because nothing suggested that whatever had followed the box from owner to owner was gone. Only quieter. Contained objects don't stop existing. They simply stop being accessible. The Dybbuk box was stored in environments designed to minimize risk. Climate-controlled rooms. Limited access. Clear handling protocols. And still, issues continued. Not dramatic ones. Subtle ones. People working near the box reported unease they couldn't articulate. A sensation of being watched without any clear source. Difficulty concentrating. Restless sleep after long shifts. No one was harmed in obvious ways. But no one wanted to stay near it longer than necessary. Jason continued monitoring reports long after his own health stabilized. He noticed that symptoms no longer followed the box aggressively, but they also never fully stopped. They hovered. Occasional nightmares. Sudden anxiety. That same unmistakable jasmine scent appearing briefly and disappearing just as quickly. Always without explanation. What unsettled Jason most was how the box seemed to adapt. Early on, it produced dramatic reactions. Intense fear, physical illness, vivid visions. Later, it became quieter. More restrained. Almost patient. If the stories of Dybbuks are taken at face value, they are not creatures of chaos. They are opportunistic. They attach to vulnerability. They persist. And persistence doesn't require noise. The box itself remained unremarkable. No visible changes. No physical damage. No signs of movement or tampering. It did not need to act. It only needed to be present. Over time, public interest turned the Dybbuk box into something else entirely. A curiosity. A legend. A debate topic. Skeptics pointed out the lack of definitive proof. Believers pointed to the consistency of experiences. Both sides agreed on one thing. No one wanted to own it. The final owner to publicly acknowledge possessing the box stated clearly that it would never be opened again. Not for research. Not for entertainment. Not for proof. Some doors, once closed, are better left that way. Jason Haxton's health eventually improved enough for him to resume a normal life. The worst symptoms faded, though some effects lingered. He never claimed full recovery. He also never claimed fear. What he described instead was respect. Not for a demon. Not for a curse. But for uncertainty. Because the most dangerous things are not always the ones we understand. They are the ones that behave consistently without explanation. The Dybbuk box still exists. Sealed. Stored. Quiet. And that may be the most unsettling detail of all. Not that something terrible happened, but that something could happen again, if someone, somewhere, decides they know better. Because the story of the Dybbuk Box has never been about what was inside the cabinet. It has always been about what happens when people assume control over things they do not fully understand. And the box has never corrected them. It has only waited. Some stories end with answers. This one doesn't. The Dybbuk Box was sealed, moved, hidden away. But sealed doesn't mean empty, and quiet doesn't mean gone. Nothing about this story proves the supernatural exists, and nothing about it proves it doesn't. What it proves is something far more uncomfortable. That fear doesn't need belief. That harm doesn't need permission. And that some things don't announce themselves when they arrive. They wait. Somewhere, that box still exists. Unopened. Undisturbed. And the only thing standing between it and another chapter is curiosity. So if there's one lesson here, it's this. Be careful what you bring into your home. Be careful what you open. And be especially careful of the things that don't ask to be believed, before they follow you. Good night.